Hello, Free from an Allergy community, and welcome back to another virtual show. I am so excited to introduce our next speaker to raise awareness on celiac disease, Olivia Jackson Battye. She's the managing director and publisher of Yum Gluten-free. So after 9 years of unexplained symptoms, Olivia was diagnosed with celiac disease in 2010. She has always been a lover of food, health, and wellness, and has channeled this diagnosis into a passion for spreading awareness about the harmful effects of gluten on those with celiac disease. With her background in public health and nutrition, she is passionate about increasing awareness for celiac disease, sharing practical tips and tricks for managing strict dietary restrictions and connecting gluten-free products to consumers everywhere. So with a warm heart, I welcome you, Olivia.
Thank you, Lauren. Thanks so much for having us to the Free from an Allergy team as well. So excited to be here. Although we can't be in person, I'm glad we're doing these future virtual events so we can keep this going and exposure for Celiac Awareness Week as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that this is a close topic to home for you. And so that's why when we were creating this structure, we said straight away, we need Olivia on here, because what better partnership then is this as a contributor, because you've got Yum Gluten-free, you've dealt with it, you're experiencing it, you are living with it every single day.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I've been diagnosed. It'll be 11 years this year. So yeah, and I was sick for nearly 10 before that. So it's been pretty much my whole life going on.
Well, I guess we go straight into the questions, because that rolls in nicely with my first question. How did your gluten-free journey start? What happened? What were your symptoms? How was your life different?
Wow. I think a lot of people can relate that I had a very long preamble to my eventual diagnosis. So when I say I was sick for nearly 10 years, so I was 11 until 20, and I was recurrently unwell. So that was through a myriad of symptoms, and celiac disease can be so hard to diagnose because it's an autoimmune condition, which means your body can present its symptoms in so many different ways. So I was diagnosed as a hormonal teenager, and a stomach stressor was what I was capped as by my GP and by the many, many doctors that I saw, because although I was having these GI related symptoms, I was also having really severe anxiety and psoriasis. And they were really saying that, well, you're having all this anxiety, you're, changing hormonally, you've had a change in your life, and you're stressed. So of course, you're having these reactions, you're feeling sick. And even though I was physically vomiting and having diarrhea, and I was so unwell that I wouldn't attend events and things, that was still where it was placed. Fortunately, my parents were a huge advocate, especially mom kept it on the DL from my dad the number of times I stayed home from school and things like that because I was so unwell, but kept pushing and pushing. And eventually you sort of give up and you accept that maybe that's just it. And it wasn't until I was 19 and I was on my exchange actually in Australia. So obviously I'm American. So before I moved here, it's been here for years now. So this was 11 and a half years ago. And I was supposed to be here for a year. Ended up having to cut my time short, dropped out of my second semester and went home because I was so unwell. And I started a food journal. Now, I actually never attributed gluten to my symptoms because they weren't presenting themselves immediately after eating something. And but I knew it was food related. I eventually was like, it's definitely food related. And the one symptom that finally got me diagnosed was I told my GP that it felt like I had cigarette burns in my stomach, which is what I think must have been my villi just completely disintegrating inside my body. So anyway, and that triggered something for him, and eventually got a test for celiac disease, and I 100% off the charts had it. So it was diagnosed finally.
So I know with celiac disease, it is a gene. So did anyone in your family have it, or?
Well, we are pretty confident that it is from my dad's side, and my dad's father he died a long time ago. He was much older than my grandmother, so he was a lot older just as when I was growing up, but he actually had colon cancer. But he also is from a coal mining town, and you just sort of sucked it up. So he had a lot of issues that were just never addressed, and you didn't really do anything about it in that day and age. So we're pretty certain that's where it's from. One of my sisters has the gene, but my mom doesn't. Dad hasn't been gene tested yet. We're still trying to get him to do that.
In denial. Wow. I don't think people are, but I don't think a lot of people understand the severity behind your quality of life. It changes. Like the fact you couldn't even go out and you didn't even want to go to events, and that you have to cut your time short in Australia because it was actually lowering your quality of life.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's all encompassing. And I think not everyone is symptomatic as well. So there are other things that get you diagnosed other than just really reducing your quality of life. But regardless, whenever you are symptomatic for anything, and no one's able to diagnose you, it makes you feel very insecure about your health and well-being and within yourself, and whether you're hypochondriac and all these things. So it really does escalate into other areas as well.
Yeah. So then once you were diagnosed with celiac disease, how did that change the household dynamics? How did you transition into just a usual everyday household into, we actually need to take proper procedures and protocols to make sure that we're not cross-contaminating with gluten?
Yeah. Obviously, it's a huge, huge change. So I was 20 at the time, and I was living with friends at university, and I had really amazing roommates who, while they didn't go gluten-free or anything, they wanted to learn about it, and they were very supportive of keeping everything separate. I ended up getting, my whole suite of pots and pans and things like that. So we just kept all of that separate to them. At the time, to be honest, the education was so poor, which we can talk about more, but I didn't have any follow-up care or anything like that. So it did take a long time for me to understand that I was probably being contaminated ongoing. And I wasn't aware because I was still sick for a while after I was diagnosed. But it was a gradual change. And at the time, in 2010, there just weren't that many options. So it was a tough transition personally, because you're going, and today you can get some really great stuff, but then you really, really couldn't. And the one thing that changed, I think, in my family's household is my dad just couldn't wrap his mind around the idea that, sharing a ladle from a gluten-free bowl of pasta to a regular, wheat-filled bowl of pasta, is a no-no if you have celiac disease. It's cross-contamination. And it took him, in between that and accidentally just scooping things, whatever, it probably took him a couple of years until finally, he's a chemical engineer. And I said to my dad, Dad, it's just like if you're in a chemical plant and you're working with something and a drop of something else that gets put into the batch you're in, the whole vat is gone. You have to get rid of it. And that was the first time that it really clicked for my dad, that is exactly what cross-contamination is and how serious you need to be. So made a big difference. But it was a journey, that transition. It doesn't happen overnight. Took years, really.
No. And I think even having celiac disease as well, like yourself, you're probably thinking, oh yeah, I can just quickly use this pot. And then it's constantly thinking, especially at the start, it's like you've got to constantly think like, hang on a second, is this my pot? No, this is really serious. I can't just cross-contaminate here.
Yeah, it takes time. It's a big mental shift for you as well. I mean, we have a course, Gluten-Free Living online course, and I can talk more about that as well later. But we really talk about how to transition the household, because it's so important that you have a safe space in your life. Because I think when you are going to other people's houses and you're dining out, that can be really overwhelming. So at least if you can come home and you can trust the equipment that you're working with, you can make a meal, then it does help. It just helps that peace of mind, and for you to feel comfortable in your own space.
Definitely. And what is some useful tips, I guess, for someone who is just starting on their celiac journey?
There's it's endless. Honestly, support is everything. Wow. So I said I didn't have any follow-up care. Really, that is the biggest thing. When I was diagnosed, literally, I was given a phone call from the nurse practitioner, and she said, "Hey, your bloods came back and everything looked good, but you have something called celiac disease, so you can't eat gluten." Okay, bye. I mean, literally, that was like the extent of my care. Fortunately, we had a celiac support group in the city I was living in, and this was, before really Instagram or Facebook, or at least from a business perspective, it didn't really exist. And that is why I'm so passionate about Yum, is because your community is critical. If you aren't feeling supported from your GP, go find another GP, find a health practitioner of your choice, someone that can help guide you. But there's also that community, that emotional support. There's so much knowledge to be gained. Knowledge is truly power. And that's why we did the course. You just get equipped. And that's why the community on Yum Gluten Free, I'm really passionate about, because people's lives change when you feel comfortable and confident within your condition. So yeah, get educated and get some community around you as well.
Well, could you tell us a bit more about Yum Gluten Free and your passion for this business? I know that it started, or something, a fire ignited within once you were diagnosed with celiac disease to create something like this, but what was the actual process?
Well, Yum Gluten Free has been a journey, and honestly, it has changed so much over the past, it'll be, I think, 8 years. So it's been a long process, Yum, and it's been many things, but the one thing that it's always been is an online resource effectively for people to be able to have a space where they can feel supported and they can be informed. Number one. Number two is supporting businesses. So with Yum, it's something that I'm so passionate about, and I've always had a real heart for small business, but especially being diagnosed with celiac disease, small business is our life, because we need those businesses to be creating new products and to be innovative and to get on the shelves and be accessible. So with Yum, I'm incredibly passionate about making sure that businesses have a platform, so that way they have a place where there's an audience there that needs them, and they're able to quickly reach their target market, because it's so hard when you have these huge brands that dominate the shelves at Kohl's, obviously. So yeah, give them an opportunity to have their own exposure is huge. So community and then supporting small brands is my heart with Yum, and it through everything that's ever been done with Yum, through the digital magazines, through the online course, through just social media as a whole, is so powerful. And then doing things like this, using using Yum as a brand and as a platform to be able to reach other people and make sure people always feel empowered, and that this is not the end. This diagnosis should be the beginning of your health and your wellness. And there's so much opportunity to enjoy food and enjoy life, even as a celiac.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a phenomenal resource. If you haven't been on there yet, make sure you go check it out. There is just an abundance. Olivia writes articles, recommended enough. How do you maintain a positive mindset and not allow gluten-free to affect your everyday life?
Well, honestly, I can answer this question as 2021 Olivia, and it's very different than if I answered it as 2010 Olivia, or if I answered it as 2013 Olivia, because it has been a journey, like I said, and I will continue to be a journey. But I was really sick probably for the first maybe 4 years of my diagnosis, which is a huge chunk. I've been diagnosed for 10 years, and it's a lot of it that I was unwell, and I was physically unwell and I was mentally unwell. So I got so paranoid about getting sick that I really struggled with the fear of getting sick and really feeling anxious around food. And it was interesting because, on a personal note, I had never struggled with, a lot of things that teenage girls struggle with, or lots of people struggle with when it comes to your body and things like that. And all of a sudden I was diagnosed with this condition that made me afraid of food. And it was this whole thing. At 20, you think that you have a real handle on a lot of your life, which you don't at 20, but you really think you do. And then it's like this thrown at you. And it took me a lot of years to recognize that a lot of what I was dealing with wasn't actually cross-contamination. It wasn't actually me getting sick. It was me building up a scenario, because I had gotten sick. I had been cross-contaminated before. I've been trying really hard, asking all the right questions. And then you're unwell, and it really does get to a point where you think, I can't eat anything ever. And I would sit down at a restaurant, even if it was a 100% gluten-free space, and I'd already feel sick. And that's when I knew I needed to get some help. So I saw a psychologist and I spoke to my counselor and sought support that way. So really just overcoming fears, which is, even though, you think, well, this isn't, I'm not afraid of heights or something. Well, it's equally as real. And actually it's more real because it's something that you face every single day, multiple times a day. So I really need to address that from a psychological standpoint. But then also I just needed some good experiences. So I got really serious about how to address celiac disease when I'm talking to family, when I'm talking to friends, and when I'm dining out. So built myself a really solid script, and I built a lot of confidence around that. And then I had a lot of really good experiences, and I learned how to say no. If I'm in an environment that I don't feel safe, how to say confidently no, that unfortunately, I'm not going to eat right now, whether because I am not feeling well or because I don't trust the environment. You can come up with your own story to not make the other person feel bad, and that's fine too if you're at someone's house. But not to force yourself to be, etiquette's not always number one when your health is concerned. So there's a way that you can migrate around that. Anyway, and since then, honestly, I get so much joy out of all these amazing brands and businesses and cafes and restaurants and bakeries that are just popping up right, left, and center all over the world and in my own community, that it just gets me excited. So reminding yourself that food is exciting, like this isn't the end. Again, this is the beginning of your health and wellness journey. And this is what you need to do to stay well. So yeah, keeping that attitude as the forefront, not what I can't have. Oh, I can't eat this, I can't do that. Well, what can I have? And I'm better, and I'm healthy, and I'm well for it. So yeah.
Yeah, I love that. It's all about your mindset and your perspective. Instead of focusing on what you can't have, focus on what you can have.
Yeah. And there's so many great snacks, and I'm here for it. So.
Oh, and especially because there's so many good recipes online as well. I know even in our content library, some of our contributors have contributed so many gluten-free snacks. I'm like, this is amazing. My next question for you. What were 5 things you wish someone told you at the start of your journey?
There's probably 105 things. So let's see. This is so basic, and this is going to sound ridiculous, but honestly, I wasn't even told what gluten was when I was diagnosed. I did not have a concept what it was, where you could find it, how to avoid it, and how to stay safe. So the basics, really, if you're recently diagnosed, learn the basics, really understand what gluten is, that it's a protein and where it can exist and why and what it does to your body. So what's gluten and how it affects you as a celiac? I think maybe that's number 2, how it affects you, because learning about your response when you have an autoimmune response, it's not an allergy, it's not an intolerance, it's not anything else. An autoimmune response is completely different. Your body reacts completely differently if you have an autoimmune disease. And gluten is not, changing your mindset around gluten being a food your body's reacting to. Gluten is just the element that your body is reacting to. And it happens to be in a food, because we're so conditioned with allergies and things like that. So really changing your mindset, I think, is really important to understand the impact. I think where it's hidden is a big one. So much food is naturally gluten-free, unpackaged food, pretty much, anything that's not processed effectively. I know there's freekeh and barley, and there's some grains, but for the most part,
fruit and veg.
Yeah, fruit, veg, meat, fish, a lot of grains, they are already gluten-free. So, knowing that, number 1, but then also knowing where it's hidden. So not just food as well, there's sauces and things like that, but also toasters and fryers, even medicines and supplements. You need to ask your pharmacist if you're getting something. The other day we were getting some Nurofen or something for Eloise, and one of the brands, I think the orange and the strawberry flavor, had wheat in them, but we had to do a bit of digging to find out. So that, it feels very overwhelming, but once you identify what does and what doesn't, then, you can feel more in control. But yeah, where it's hidden is a big one. I think the two, if I can say two more, one, it does get easier. I mean, it really does. Like, it is so overwhelming in the beginning, and give yourself grace and give yourself time, because it's a big transition. You need to have an opportunity to mourn, because you're facing a huge life change, and you don't need to minimize it, but know that it's going to get better. You're going through a process, and it takes time. But food is still fun. You can still really enjoy food. And I think the biggest one that I thought was just never going to happen ever again is traveling. So traveling is possible. And we've done a lot of traveling. Obviously, I wasn't even living in Australia when this happened. So then I would traveled here and, since moved. But I think knowing that you can still travel and do the things that you love, it's just about preparation, and really being prepared is critical.
Yeah. Well, I know that you just touched on the medicine with Eloise. So you do just have a little bubba now.
Yeah.
When will you know she does carry the celiac gene? Do you know she already has it, or?
Wow. So there's a lot of I think a lot of people don't know much about the celiac gene, and it's really important to know, because when you get diagnosed with celiac disease, generally you're getting the antibodies tested, and your antibodies are a response to gluten being in your system. But you can do a test before that, which is actually testing your genes for celiac. So if you have the celiac gene, so I won't go through the structure of them, but there's a few of them, and then some subcategories that if you have those genes, then you have a certain percentage of chance of one day getting celiac disease. It doesn't mean you necessarily have them today, because celiac, like a lot of autoimmune diseases, lay dormant until they're triggered by some event, some sort of stress, emotional, physiological, whatever, environmental stress in your life. So we had a stressful situation with a family when I was 10, and we're pretty sure that's what triggered my celiac disease. So the timing checked out. So anyway, we definitely wanted to get Eloise celiac gene tested as soon as possible, because my husband has been gene tested and he does not have the gene. And you can do the gene test at any time, because your genes don't ever change. They're the same from day one till the end. So I really wanted to do this before she started solids. Now, I wanted to do it before she started solids because it would just impact how I introduce solids. I would still, I won't have to go through that whole thing, but introduce everything, but it would change where my priorities were effectively and in what order. So got her gene tested already at 6 months, which was a bit of a battle getting someone to approve the test. But it actually was so fine. She was a champion, and we found out she does not have the celiac gene.
Oh.
So she will never effectively have celiac disease, which is super exciting. It was actually funny though, Lauren, because obviously I was thrilled. Like, she told me, I called and they told me over the phone. I was like, can you email me the paperwork? Because I just couldn't believe it. And I was so happy. That's such a huge relief when it comes to school and friends' houses and cross-contamination and just all that kind of thing. But there's almost a part of me that felt like my whole life I'd prepared for something, and then I didn't have to do it. And it was just I just felt so ready for my child to have a gene and go through this process. And anyway, thank God, it's great. But it was a very strange sort of process for me as well, being on the other side, and this being not just my role as a person, but my role in my business and in my family. I've got nieces that have celiac disease and things like that. So anyway, she doesn't. We already found out, and I'm so glad and I'm so grateful that that's the case, and her life will be just a little bit easier, not having to deal with one other thing. I'm sure she'll have other things in life, but just not that one other element to make it a bit tricky when it comes to all of those school and friends and everything.
Yeah.
So,
well, and you said your partner doesn't have celiac disease. How does he support you? So, or even in anyone, how does someone who does not have celiac disease support a loved one who does have it?
Yeah. Oh, such a good question, because I think people really struggle to know what to do. I mean, fortunately, kind of in two ways. When I met Alex, my husband, he knew literally nothing about gluten. Like, I mean, he was like very basic. So it was kind of great. It was like, you just from the get-go went through everything together. And actually, when we met, I was at probably my worst when it came to food anxiety. So we didn't even have a meal together for like 3 months into dating. And I just tried to find a way to sort of explain to him that I wanted to do other things without feeling like I was, I don't know, a crazy person for not wanting to eat or go on a date that's at dinner. So we did lots of other fun things, and he was super relaxed and made me feel so much better and we got to do other great things that aren't just like sitting at a dinner table together. We went hiking and everything else. So anyway, it was a great excuse for fun dates. But I think the best thing that you can do so if your child is diagnosed, or your parent is diagnosed, or an auntie or cousin or whatever, and you're doing meals together, is really to get informed. So try to gain as much information as you can about the condition. Also ask questions. So that getting informed might be through that person. So through your loved one who's been diagnosed, don't, try not to make them feel like, it's this weird alien thing. Like, it's okay. They've been diagnosed with celiac disease. Okay, great. What does that mean for us at Christmas? Or, I want to bake you something because I love you. Is that a possibility still? And let them sort of guide you for what they're comfortable with, because that might change over time. And then try your best not to make that person feel like an inconvenience, because you better believe that person already feels like an inconvenience 99% of the time. They're eating out and they have to ask questions, and they're with people and they feel awkward and self-conscious and everything else. So I think that's like the number one way you can support them, is just to let them know that it's okay and that this wasn't their choice. And you want to make sure that they stay well and that they're healthy, and that you can go above and beyond to help support them in that. So yeah, not making someone feel like an inconvenience with anything, I think, is great, but especially when it comes to food, and because that's how we show love in a lot of ways, is through food.
Yeah. Love language. I'm Italian, so love language is food for me.
Yeah, exactly.
So when you are eating out, I guess just very quickly, what are some useful tips that you do prior to eating out? Do you research the restaurant? Do you make sure they have a celiac menu?
Yeah. So there are so many things. We're going to relaunch our gluten-free living online course, because it is like so packed with stuff, because that is the most overwhelming part of being diagnosed with celiac disease, is the dining out bit, because it's where a lot of our life exists. So my absolute top tips are, obviously, do your research beforehand. So look for a place that openly talks about it on their website, or that's been talked about by, me or someone else that that you follow along online. We've got city lists. I'm gonna have to update everything because of COVID, but it's a good place to start, at least to know they are listed. And then honestly, probably my top tip over that is to call at an off-peak time. So if you have any sort of if you know in advance that you're going somewhere and you're looking for a place to eat, try to call them at a time that's, not peak lunch or breakfast or dinner, and see if you can get onto a manager. And although celiac disease is not an allergy, I always say, is there a manager or someone around that I can speak to about food allergies? And it just, helps everyone feel like this is really serious, because it is, but, sometimes you have to go that extra mile just to get the right person on the phone. And the reason why you want to call it an off-peak time is because you want to be calling at a time they want to receive your phone call. If they've got a line out the door, you are an inconvenience to them. They've got things right pressing. You want to be able to speak in the time that they can take the time that you need to go through. And I talk about all the things. First of all, do you offer gluten-free? Okay, great. First start. Do you cater for people with celiac disease? And lots of times that could answer everything straight away, because if the answer is absolutely, we have a dedicated gluten-free fryer we use every night, or you just tell us and we do it shallow fry in the pan, or if yes, lots of times they'll go into it. So that's like a lot of your questions just answered like that, and it's so comforting. And if no, then you have to decide whether or not they're the right place for you. But, you can talk about things like, can you toast bread on between baking paper in your press? Or, don't use any butter. Can I have olive oil on my bread instead, or whatever, going for breakfast? So thinking about places that cross-contamination can occur. And I mean, that's probably like a really big one, is to go through that list, which we talk about. And I do share heaps on Yum, so you can search through posts and see what you can find. But that's a big one, going through that list of questions. And then whenever you get there, so you've done all your research, you've spoken to the person, and you're like, oh my gosh, this is awesome, they're all over it. Biggest thing after that is just to go in with a positive attitude and just trust that you have done everything that you can in advance to know that this is a safe place. Take on that confidence you had on that phone call and walk through the door with it. Because if you're already feeling anxious, then you might trigger some nerves that don't necessarily need to be there if it's a safe space. I personally take GluteGuard. I'm not, I don't promote anything to anyone to what they should do. But for me, that's just like one more thing with everything else I do. You can hop on their website and have a look at what they do. But it has to be before you consume the food, and it's a digestive enzyme. So hope, if anything were to happen, that's one more thing I've done. But I don't eat anywhere that I don't feel 100% safe dining at. I just don't eat if something happens and I think, oh, maybe it's not as safe as I thought, then I would just have snacks, which I always have with me all of the time. So.
And I think that's such a good perspective to have as well. And mindset is, don't be embarrassed to have snacks or to feel like you need to prepare, because at the end of the day, it's your health, and without your health, the quality of life is just not the same.
100%, totally.
So to wrap up, I just have a few more questions for you. My second last question for you, what are 5 of your simple tricks for substituting gluten in baking?
Well, Lauren, for anyone who follows along with Yum, you will know that I am not a baker, and I often mess everything up that I ever try. But it's never the baking fault. It's because I'll substitute. I'm like, oh, I don't have this, I'll use this or whatever, and I totally stuff it up. I'll make a healthy option, So really, I don't know if I can give you 5, but my top couple of tips are definitely, we have a lot of great one-to-one solutions. So like when it comes to baking, if it calls for all-purpose flour, they're, Well and Good and Orgren and Bob's Red Mill. A lot of that stuff you can buy at the supermarket. You can buy on the GF Pantry is an online gluten-free store. And then like health food shops and things like that as well. Those are great. And then again, I'm all about supporting my small businesses as well. So if you want to make brownies, there are so many awesome brownie packets that are gluten-free that you can buy these days that are readily available. And so for me, all I have to do is add the egg and some milk, and we're laughing. So I'm here for it. I'm trying. My husband's a baker. My husband's ready to make Eloise's first gluten-free, first birthday cake. So probably will be gluten-free because I'm going to need to have some as well, obviously. But yeah.
Absolutely. That is a big thing. You definitely need to have some cake.
Yeah, definitely. Of course. So yeah, I can't give you 5. We actually did a baking issue. Maybe it was June last year. I'll have to share about it, or I can send you the link, but it's free digital magazine that you can look at. And it was all about baking. And we had quite a few articles about different places, different flours you can substitute. And then Georgia Barnes did an article, and she was talking about all types of cool things. But she even was saying that there are a lot of flours that she prefers, what did she use? It was like chickpea flour or something for tempura, or maybe it was tapioca. Yeah, because it's so light. And anyway, so maybe I'll send that link so we can share about that as well. So yeah, there's lots of tips out there, but I'm no baking aficionado, unfortunately.
Well, thank you so much for your time. My last and final question for you, because I know Eloise will probably, I know she's asleep right now, but who knows if she'll wake up anytime. So I want to give you enough time to at least have some you time. What's next for Yum Gluten Free? What can we expect? What can we look at? I know you said that you were going to be revamping a few of your courses.
Totally. Well, so Obviously last year was a huge year for everyone and a lot of things hit the back burner. And then before that, I was very sick in my first half of my pregnancy. So Yum has been trucking along, thank goodness, but probably at a slower pace than what I'd done in the years before then. Definitely revamping the course. I've got some more things I want to add, and I think I want to change the structure to make it easier for people to do in their own time. Because right now it's set up like videos, which I love, but that's not for everybody. And that's probably number one from the Yum perspective. There is something else super exciting coming up, which I hate people do this, but I'm not going to share about it now because it's not really.
That's okay. They need to follow.
Yeah. So you have to follow along. It'll be the next few months. We've got a project that's I'm working on that is just something that really needs to happen, and I can't believe it doesn't exist, and I'm so excited, and it will affect every single person who dines out gluten-free in Australia. So it is coming soon, and I can't wait to share. So stay tuned. So yeah, Yum Gluten-free, Instagram and Facebook, just YUM, Yum Gluten-free. And yeah, this year will be really exciting. So I want to share more tips and tricks like this. I think that's the biggest thing that I can do. And then we've got a Facebook community called the Yum Gluten Free Village. So I'm ready to jump back into that and make sure our community feels confident and strong and ready to dine out and get excited about having celiac disease and eating gluten free. So those are the big ones.
Yeah. And definitely being able to dine out. I know it's still a little bit hazy with lockdown here. Now we're free, now we're not. But when we can go out and dine out, I know a lot of people jumping onto them. So just not even having to worry if you have celiac disease that you can jump on. It's like, we're not locked down anymore. Let's go out let's go out to go get something to eat, and it doesn't matter.
I was very pregnant, but I was so emotional towards the end, towards the beginning of COVID. That was at the end of my pregnancy. And I just was so impacted by, the devastating impact that this had on all of these amazing businesses that I've worked so hard to cater to people that have needs like me. So yeah, that's a huge priority for me, is to be in a space that I'm able to share what's available and, who's around and who started and everything else whenever we can safely go out and dine out again, and even for takeaway and things like that as well. So I want to make sure they have that platform again, the businesses, so they can reach their target audience and they can thrive once that's one of the options.
Definitely. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Olivia. Truly, the Free From an Allergy community cannot get enough of your stuff, and just the knowledge and passion you have behind celiac disease, because it's out there. And even if someone is living because due to a life choice that they've decided to live more of a gluten-free life, the resources you have on Yum Gluten Free is phenomenal. As I said at the start, it's amazing. So if you haven't already, make sure you check it out. And so just thank you so much for this.
Thank you. I loved it. Thanks for this opportunity. And I'm so excited for Celiac Awareness Week and just to continue to promote awareness all over Australia and the world as well. So thank you so much for letting me have a voice in this space.
That's okay. Have a beautiful afternoon. Bye, everyone.